Welcome to the Personality Couch podcast, where we discuss all things personality and clinical practice. I'm your host, Doc Bach, and I'm here with my saintly co-host, Doc Fish. We are both licensed clinical psychologists in private practice, and today we are continuing our series on pathological narcissism. In recent episodes, we have talked quite a bit about different types, subtypes, and themes, but in this episode, we're going to take a closer look at communal narcissism, or saintly narcissism. This type focuses on achieving power through people, schmoozing a community, and looking inordinately helpful. So these types can also hide in plain sight and may be part of your community. So let's dive in. Okay, so historically and even now, we seem to like to group people into binary opposites, like good, bad, rich, poor, helpful, unhelpful. And many of our early researchers did this too, putting people into two categories, agentic or communal. So agency or being agentic means being an agent of the self. So assertive, dominant, independent, and confident, which sounds like a grandiose narcissist, right?
Definitely.
And then communion is things like warmth, being caring, helpfulness to others. Other ways to think of this are agentic is getting ahead and communal is getting along. Or focusing on the self versus focusing on others.
So narcissistic behavior was thought for decades to be purely self-serving to the ego, so like agentic, which makes sense. And then the grandiose types really embody this. But as we've been learning, narcissism does not just come in a grandiose package, it comes in many flavors.
Exactly. So fast forward to this pivotal research study in 2012 that questioned, is it possible that a narcissist is seeking grandiosity, power, etc., and satisfies such desires from a community through appearing helpful and altruistic?
Ooh, fascinating.
And they found, surprise, surprise, indeed, self-perceived selflessness can sometimes be the vainest form of selfishness. And in that case, it may constitute perfected egoism.
Whoa.
Yeah. Let's break that down. So some types of narcissists have perfected the way to gratify the self and ego needs, even if it means being inordinately helpful or saintly, like Mother Teresa.
Wow. Okay. I imagine that these types are also characterized by like moral superiority or just like acting better than others.
Yeah. And personality, as we know, is tricky. So what's on the outside of the package may not necessarily match the core motivations.
Okay. So this is blowing my mind. You're saying there's a helpful narcissist who focuses on others. What does that even look like?
Great question. So interestingly, one research study from 2018 found that communal narcissists don't just deceive us, they deceive themselves too. Like they really believe they are quite helpful, delusionally so. So why do you think this might be, Doc Fish?
Okay, well, likely they can't handle any other perspective. So if they're not actually helpful, then they're not valuable or good. They're worthless and bad, which is not something a narcissist can sit with.
Exactly. It's a way to protect their fragile ego. So their belief of supreme helpfulness is a deeply seated belief about the self, and you dare not challenge it, right? So these are the public do-gooders. The public presence is extremely altruistic, but behind the scenes, not so much.
Okay, so there's also like a social mask, but that mask can slip or even maybe come off behind closed doors?
Oh, yes. And I've even known some cases where it's abusive behind the scenes, but you'd never guess it from how they present to the public.
Oh, that's really sad and kind of scary.
Yes, exactly. And I keep coming back to the movie Bernie with the super helpful undertaker. And then privately, he killed his much older grandma-like lover.
Oh my.
I'm telling you, this has to be one of the best movies I've seen displaying what appears to be communal narcissistic behavior. But, watch it if you think that you have a communal narcissist in your life, or just if you're interested in unusual psychology stuff. Shameless plug.
Okay, Doc Brock, I think I'm getting the picture here, but where do these types of narcissists even show up?
That's a great question. There's lots of places. So just follow the places that help. Places like charities or do-good initiatives, humanitarian efforts, sponsorships, not-for-profit events with a charismatic host.
Oh, yikes.
So you're getting the picture here, right? Like, I overheard an interaction recently about a free networking event, and it eventually turned into the presumably communal narcissist taking over the conversation and saying unprompted, like, I'll find the location. I'll take over the event instead. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll get the caterers. I'll find a sponsor. So essentially, I'll make sure there's a photo op and that my name is promoted within the event instead of yours, even though it was totally this other person's idea.
Gosh, that is yucky. It's like selfish altruism or like self-centered pro-social behavior. Okay, where else might these communal narcissists be?
Yeah, so again, follow the helpers. Donation or helping or rescue centers. This is also where virtue signaling might come into play. So intentionally working with disenfranchised people groups or animals to signal their righteousness and helpfulness to the world, like showing the world that, yes, I'm such a good person.
We're literally feeding the ego. Like, I'm good. I'm not bad.
Sometimes also this can look like adopting people, like taking people into their home or actually adopting kiddos that they maybe behind the scenes neglect or adopting kiddos from other less fortunate situations so that they can become the poster family of good things and righteousness.
Not everyone who adopts is this way, but it can be a page in the communal narcissist playbook. That does make sense.
Yeah. And not everyone who's helpful is a communal narcissist either. It doesn't mean that all people who help have like this dark underbelly, but we'll get to the signs of that in a little bit. But it can also look like adopting animals, like living things, right? So like saved another life today. Polly Parrot would have continued to endure abuse if I hadn't rescued her, right?
My goodness. So we're rescuing people, rescuing animals.
And you might also find them as generous donors for events to get the plaque, to get the applause, the photo op, or the park bench in their honor.
So there's a public-facing aspect to this. Like these helpful behaviors are done in front of others and or maybe shouted from the rooftops for attention.
Yep, exactly.
I'm sure there's other places, though, where communal narcissism is seen.
Yes. And sadly, there's some in our profession as well. So helping professionals, medical, mental health, healthcare in general can have an overrepresentation of these types.
Oh, I can see how a form of narcissism involving helping would be seen in the medical and psychological fields. There's a power differential between provider and patient. So providers easily can feel like they have power and maybe could even rescue or save a patient. Narcissism, right? Or helping them. Like, let me find superiority by helping you, the lesser of us two.
Yep. And then unsurprisingly, we also have social media. So these types are particularly active on social platforms. And I'm curious, why do you think that might be?
Well, again, I think we have that public-facing mask. Like helping behaviors are not enough. They have to be seen. by others. So what do you think you'll find on their social media?
Oh, of course, photos like, look at me helping the starving children, or look how generous I was with my political donation to this cause. Look at all the people I hosted at my mansion. Whew, I'm exhausted, bragging about how much they spent, how many they helped, how long it took, how great they are. No one else stepped up. It was just me.
That is so yucky.
Yeah. And you see the grandiose element in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why communal is actually part of that grandiose domain. Mm-hmm. So a 2021 study found that communal narcissism was correlated with increased use of Instagram and Twitter, not necessarily Reddit.
Oh, well, that makes sense, right? It is for us nerdy readers. It contains less photos and is maybe less in your face.
It's less shiny. It's just content. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So communal narcissism correlated with sharing content and desiring feedback and validation. Not surprising given what we know about narcissism, right? And then communal narcissists rated their content as better than others.
Well, of course, right? We're still talking about narcissism.
Exactly. I'm the best. So they also found, quote, communal narcissism relates to greater problematic behavior offline, such as peer perceived aggression, counterproductive workplace behavior, which often relates to interpersonal conflict, and communal narcissistic statements on Facebook, which are generally viewed negatively by others.
Okay. So the person with the communal narcissism has the perspective that they are helpful and wonderful, and yet others don't see them as helpful as they see themselves.
That's exactly right. Yep. And there's been multiple research studies that have shown that as well. Yeah. So social media, of course, then confirms a narcissist's greatest fantasies, especially visual or image-based platforms. Shocker.
Okay, there might be some delusion here then. Mm-hmm. So the narcissist thinks that they're great and their image is great, but others still might find their content negative.
Right. Because for the people who can see through the shtick or like the sickening sweet, like, ooh, that's just, it's too much. It feels inauthentic. It doesn't bode well. Oh, and then, of course, we will also find these types in religious organizations and churches. I bet you have some hypotheses about that.
Well, yeah, it's an organization with hierarchy levels, with crowds, with people in need, judgment, and usually a focus on doing good.
Yeah.
So religions are inherently communal because it's a group. Now, whether or not there's healthy helping is a whole different story, but it is a great structure for communal narcissists to find their place.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the perfect performance platform with immediate feedback, either from the pulpit itself or with volunteer opportunities. And you look saintly in the process. So yes, you can blend in. And communal narcissists in church settings often then, unsurprisingly, hide behind scripture and justify their actions. So there's like a self-righteous air that can come on with this, like, but I'm doing good for the world, they might think or say. And they also can come across as like holier than thou because they've got it figured out.
Goodness, yeah. I feel like this could turn more severe, like maybe even cult-like groups.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Which brings me to cult leaders and then the concept of collective narcissism or group narcissism.
Oh, what's that?
Okay, so this can happen in family systems as well. So it's where you feel special by associating with the in-group and by maintaining the image of the in-group. So very much in-group and out-group dynamics. So others in the out-group may or may not see how special that group is, but those within the group do believe that there's something special about that group.
So it's quite literally a group that is narcissistic.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like little narcissist with a big narcissistic leader. And as we know about narcissists, they like to rub shoulders with other special people. So the wealthy, the powerful, the elite, the things that they value, to vicariously absorb that specialness. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Oh, yeah. This is making sense so far.
Yeah. So this is where a group of narcissists can empower each other in a not so great way with kind of this group think where they move as a narcissistic entity. And then, unsurprisingly, conspiracy theories are often a part of the collective narcissistic group, and they enable specialness within the group and secret group knowledge, especially with this us versus them mentality. You tracking with me so far?
Yes.
So this can also lead to increased hostility, even towards the group itself.
Okay. Help me understand that part.
Yeah. Okay, so what we know about communal narcissists is that once they achieve power and status, they become less helpful. So helping is a means to an end. Ego cookie received. Thank you. Next. So once the leader of this group achieves their desired status, they can turn on their people. And sometimes even the little narcissists or those within the collective group can turn on each other as they feel more and more powerful with the secret group knowledge.
Oh dear, I can definitely see how this could play out in like cult-like groups.
Exactly. Yeah. And then these groups are often built on insecurity, which is an unstable foundation that can crumble in on itself. So the group members can actually start conspiring against each other. And this is especially true if the group was established based on lies and conspiracy theories.
So again, the group itself functions as the narcissistic entity.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And then once there starts to be questioning of, oh, well, what about this person over here? And oh, now I can't trust you. And it can collapse in on itself because you cannot have that many egos under one roof as an entity, at least not for very long. So I think back to the Jonestown Massacre, which was likely a communal narcissistic group with a leader that eventually turned malignant.
Yeah, that's tragic.
Yeah. And so this is where he led his followers to drink cyanide and he himself took his own life. Like once people started to actually investigate the compound and look into it because of some odd behaviors. So yeah, so kind of turning. And that's also kind of the extension, narcissistic extension of the self. The group is part of the ego. You are me, I am you, we are one. So if I have to take myself out, you take yourself out too. Like really twisted.
Right. And it started as helpful. It started as a benign kind of group, but it didn't end that way.
Exactly. This is where it gets really tricky with communal narcissism because it can look like a sheep, but really underneath is often a wolf. And there can be things that are happening behind the scenes when the lights and camera aren't on. And even when you're in those like collectivistic groups, it can be dangerous to kind of get into that groupthink narcissistic mentality and just kind of follow blindly like sheep following their shepherd, but following the shepherd to the slaughter, sadly. Yeah. So this also shows up in politics. We won't go into this a whole lot for the sake of not derailing us, but communal types can show up in the political realm of things. So they can be huge donors for specific causes. They might appear on camera or in the spotlight as especially generous and like for the people. And then there's a concept called national narcissism. So similar to this like collective narcissistic identity. So national narcissism is the belief that the country is exceptional, the best, and deserving of special treatment.
Okay, this seems timely.
Yeah. So again, very similar to the collective narcissism I mentioned earlier, but we'll shelf that for a different episode, but no, it's all part of this communal mindset. And when we all start thinking in this kind of narcissistic entity type of way, following a communal leader or any other type of narcissism, really, it can get dangerous and we can go down a dark road.
Okay. But how do you actually know that the helping has gone bad?
Right. So that's a great question, because it doesn't mean that there's an underbelly to every good deed, right? It doesn't mean that people who are naturally altruistic and wanting to help or naturally communal are actually evil behind the scenes. Typically not. Typically, your helpful person just wants to be helpful and to help you and to be of service. But with communal narcissism, it's different. So what we know from the research is that communal narcissism is correlated with a need for power, not just social approval.
I see. That's the narcissistic part.
Yeah. So this is where we can also start to distinguish it among other types of narcissism. So typical grandiose narcissism doesn't really care about the social approval part. Like, they just want you to reflect back their image, which I guess it can look like approval, but it's really not about that. Like, they don't care about being liked. They just want you to reflect their greatness. That's all they ask. But with communal narcissism, there is this social approval element.
They need you to like them so that you feed them ego cookies. It's a means to an end.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a study that found that once power is achieved, they don't need to be communal anymore. Like, the mask can come off and you'll see that you were just a social pawn.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So they are willing to initially put in the legwork, the helping work, but the rise to power gives them what they need. So then their grandiosity surpasses their helping.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like a do-good group turning corrupt and bad with more and more recognition and money and power. And again, right, like that's also kind of how the Jonestown cult started out. Like, it started out benign, moral, helpful, but it ended in a massacre.
Yeah. It didn't end that way. And that's where one of the biggest signs that you can tell that it's pathological communal narcissism is the hypocrisy. So especially behind the scenes. So to the camera and in the spotlight, they look amazing. But if you live with this person, you may see a totally different side of them. Like, they can also be dark and the opposite of how they present in public. They can be mean and demeaning and belittling. And in fact, they may not even care about the cause or the people they're supporting at all. Like, they might gossip about them or disparage them when the cameras stop rolling or when they're off Instagram.
Okay, but there are people who can definitely see through these communal narcissists because of what's happening behind closed doors. So sometimes, like, if it comes out, that might be when we have scandals.
Oh, yeah. Where it's like, oh, I can't believe it was this person. Yeah. I mean, another thing to look at is like when nobody's looking or there's no parade in their honor, or the camera's not rolling, are they actually rolling up their sleeves and helping?
Oof, there's some controversial social media people getting caught in those kind of situations.
I am so not surprised.
Okay. So what happens when a communal narcissist actually exists within a relationship?
Yeah. So interestingly, in romantic relationships, communal narcissists report better quality relationships than grandiose or vulnerable narcissists. But then again, they also think that they're way more helpful than anyone else in the world. So can you actually trust their self-report?
Probably not.
Yeah. But the pitfalls in relationships are going to be things like gaslighting. That's a huge one. And it's going to be a main hurdle because other people may not believe you because they see your partner, your family member, whoever this person is, as great. Like, they know the public persona and you aren't allowed to say anything different because then that shatters their world and how they view the person. But you know who the communal narcissist is behind closed doors, and you know it doesn't add up.
Right. And this can be tricky, hence the gaslighting, but they often do positive things like humanitarian efforts or donations promoting helpful causes. So it might make it really hard to figure out that there's actually narcissism there, especially when you're in a close relationship and there's technically good evidence, right? So on one hand, we have the helpful persona. On the other hand, we have the yucky, dark, self-centered persona.
Yeah. And narcissism, I mean, it can be anywhere, right? It can be any status, any race, any gender, any income level. But interestingly, Milan and Davis have said narcissism is a preservation tactic of the wealthy. Super interesting. So this narcissism increases as wealth increases, making it more common after the 20th century. Very interesting hypothesis here.
Of course, yeah, because the less fortunate are focused on survival, not grandiosity.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And with communal narcissists, especially if there's money involved and they can give these charitable donations, these large kind of sweeping gestures of grandeur that look helpful, but really are to serve the self, that's where it can also get complicated too, because good things can happen out of these initiatives or out of these non-for-profits, and it gets tricky. And then we can gaslight ourselves going, oh, but they're doing a good thing.
Right.
But we know that there's more to the story. And that just takes us full circle back to kind of the initial binary way of thinking about people that researchers have had for decades. Like, are they altruistic or are they not? Like, are you helpful? Are you not? Are you communal? Are you agentic? And it's possible to have both. So there can be good things that come out of that. And there can also be abusive dynamics in the background. So that makes this type particularly challenging in relationships and in society.
Gosh, absolutely.
All right. So today, we learned about communal narcissism and what it looks like, and how these types delusionally believe they are incredibly helpful, even though others don't really see them as such. And we learned that these types often show up in helping settings, like at charities or organizations that give, or churches. So we can find them in religious circles and in cults. And then we briefly touched on collective narcissism, which is when a community becomes a narcissistic entity itself, often leading to conspiracy theories and dangerous outcomes. All right. And on that note, that is a wrap. So thank you for joining us today on this episode of The Personality Couch. Make sure to check out our blogs that coincide with these episodes at www.personalitycouch.com. And as always, don't forget to give us a thumbs up or rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. And on YouTube, hit that bell so you don't miss a single episode in our Narcissism series. Be well, be kind, and we'll see you next time on The Personality Couch. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute a professional relationship. If you're in need of professional help, please seek out appropriate resources in your area. Information about clinical trends or diagnoses are discussed in broad and universal terms and do not refer to any specific person or case.